Welcome to the Lancaster Patriot podcast. My name is Chris Hume. I'm the managing editor at the Lancaster Patriot. And today we have Lancaster County news and commentary for you. So our first story is a sad one. It comes from WHTM reports that one person, a woman, has died in a crash involving a car and a tractor trailer on State Route 72 late Tuesday morning. So this is State Route 72 or Lancaster Road and Lidditz Road, that intersection. And this intersection is a deadly one. This is the second fatal crash this year, both involving tractor trailer and car. And the other one involved a crash on February 9th where one person was killed as well. Now, other deaths have occurred along this stretch of road as well beyond those two. And there has been discussion about why this has not been addressed. Who's responsible? Is it a state? Is it a county, township? Who's responsible for this intersection? What can be done? And as it stands now, not much of anything has been done. So I've reached out to Representative Mindy Fee, who has spoken about this, and we're looking to have her on the podcast. So look for that to come soon as this intersection continues to prove fatal. Our second story comes also from WHTM, and this one, the headline's titled, LG Health Recognized as LGBTQ plus Equality Leader. Now I wonder why they didn't add all the various and sundry initials that have been added on to that moniker recently, but for now they've left it at that, with the plus symbol representing who knows what. But the article reads from James Wesser that Penn Medicine Lancaster General Health, LG Health, has received honors from the Human Rights Campaign Foundation for its dedication to LGBTQ plus inclusion. So apparently this group, HRC, the Human Rights Campaign Foundation, which, by the way, the idea of human rights being invoked when it comes to LGBTQ plus is absurd, which I'll discuss briefly. But anyway, this Human Rights, quote-unquote, foundation has recognized Lancaster General Health, Penn Medicine Lancaster General Health, as this great place of inclusion for these things. So LG Health joined nearly 500 other facilities that earned 100 points and the top designation. Other Penn Medicine hospitals include Chester County Hospital, Hospital of the University of Pennsylvania, and so on. Now, I would note here that we should recognize that LGBTQZ, ABC, whatever, is not a special group of people that deserve special rights. You don't get special rights because you have a deviant sexual desire or you practice deviant sexual behavior. You have rights as a human being, and those rights remain regardless of how you view yourself. But human rights are not special rights for special categories of people. And furthermore, the idea that everyone has a right to marry whoever they want is fallacious. I don't have a right to marry whoever I want. I'm married to my wife. I can't go now and marry someone else. And I don't have the right to, quote unquote, marry a man because that is not marriage. So when we couch this in terms of rights, we're really just confusing the issue. And the left uses this idea of rights when it's referring to the LGBTQ, whatever alphabet soup they want to say. They use that term rights to try to appeal to the emotions and say, well, we can't really question what they're saying because doesn't everybody deserve basic human rights? And yes, that's true, but those rights do not include all these things that the left is trying to promote. And I think it's also somewhat ironic that it is a hospital that is supposedly a place based on biology, based on science, that would embrace this sort of thing. So my question for the hospital is, when a man comes in who claims to be a woman, as apparently is the thing these days, and furthermore, he comes in claiming to be a woman, and he claims to be having a period, he claims to be menstruating, which apparently some men are claiming they have the ability to do, will the hospital then treat him as a woman and treat his case as they would a woman? Or would they say, well, you may claim to be a woman, but you are in fact a man, and therefore if you are having any issues with blood from the nether regions, we are going to take this as a serious matter because that is not something normal for men to have. So again, I don't think the hospital would do that because this is hopefully still a place where they recognize that men and women are in fact different. They are different biologically. They're different physically. They're different emotionally and mentally. Men and women are different. So I don't think the hospital is going to treat a man as a woman when they come in seeking treatment, even though they've been received this award for being an equality leader when it comes to the LGBTQ plus community, which is not a community, as I've mentioned before. We don't create communities for groups of people who celebrate sin. We don't have the adulterer community. We don't have the fornicator community. We don't have the prostitute, the people who like to go to prostitutes community. We don't have the alcoholics community and say, well, this is a community that now deserves special rights. We're only doing that with this group of people who are embracing sexual deviancy and doing it right here in Lancaster County. So LG Health is recognized for supporting that type of thing and pushing it forward. So keep that in mind when you're choosing which hospital to go to, if you have that choice. I know some people don't. There are alternatives, and I think we should have more alternatives to health care options in the county, and this is another reason to pursue those other opportunities. Well, our third story is that the candidates have turned in their petitions, and we do have some primary races to look forward to. So first of all, as far as Republican primaries, it looks like we'll have three primary contests. Senator in the General Assembly, so State Senator District 36, where Mike Miller is going to be going up against incumbent Ryan Ahmet. So that should be an interesting one. We had Mike Miller on the podcast a few days ago, and I think that could be a close race. We also have representative in the General Assembly. We have District 100. Brian Cutler is the incumbent, and Ann Weston will be going up against him. And then we have a three-way. I heard it was four. When I looked at the state website, it said there were three, and this is for District 98. Logan Hoover, Luann Fandrick, and Thomas Jones are apparently going to be on the ballot for District 98 as Republicans. And then there are two primaries in Lancaster County. This is all Lancaster County for Democrats. And you have District 49, which is a newly created district from the redistricting map. You have Ishmael Smith Wade L. going up against Janet Diaz. So that's a new district. And then District 96, where Michael Sturla is the incumbent, Dana Hamp Gulick is running against Michael Sturla in that primary race. So, let's take a look at, just real quick, I know we usually don't talk too much about the platforms of the Democrat candidates, but I thought this was interesting because my question would be to Gulick, and I will try to reach out to her. I've reached out to Representative Sturla in the past at least once. I don't believe he got back to me. I'll try again, but my question would be why she thinks she can do a better job of promoting progressive initiatives than Sturla does, because I think Sturla, as far as promoting liberal ideas, is doing a fine job, which, by the way, he just tweeted a couple days ago that he's co-sponsoring HB 2439, which would create the Healthy Family Workplace Act, Healthy Family, Healthy Workplaces Act, to provide sick paid leave. So he wants to force employers to pay money to people who take off for being sick. Now, if an employer wants to have that as one of the perks of working there, that's great. But to have the government force employers to pay people for not working is not something that you would have in a free society. So again, Sturla, he's just lockstep with the liberal agenda. So I'm curious why Gulick thinks she'd do better. But here's some of her policies, just in case you had any doubts that she would also promote the liberal agenda that is throughout the nation. But let's focus here in Lancaster County. This is someone who wants to be an elected official here in Lancaster County. And her first priority says that paid parental leave, no one should have to return to work after childbirth while still bleeding. I just find it interesting that she worded it like that. Paid parental leave, and then no one should have to return to work after childbirth while still bleeding. It's just a strange wording to me. Obviously, we know there's bleeding involved after childbirth. But this is curious because one of the things the left is doing right now is trying to erase these distinctions between men and women. And instead, they're actually saying things like, instead of referring to mothers as mothers, they're referring to those who give birth or those who bleed even. And it's ironic that the liberals are the one that would say are the ones that would say, well, you can't reduce a person down to their biology, and people can, express themselves and be whatever they want, and yet they're the ones referring to people by the fact that they bleed or don't bleed. So I'm not sure if that's what she was getting at here, but it is very strange to me to have that as the first line in your policies. Let's see what else she says here. She says that, here we go, protecting reproductive freedom for Pennsylvanians is a matter of social and economic justice. So first of all, anytime you see the word justice appended to anything, you can be fairly certain that it's going to be a liberal agenda. And reproductive freedom for Pennsylvanians means, and I can be certain that Dana Hamp-Gulick would not disagree with me if pressed, that this means women should have the right to murder their children. Now, she probably wouldn't use that phrase, but this is arguing for women to have the right and men to encourage mothers to abort their children, to murder their children. So that's part of her platform. And then, of course, we get to the infamous minimum wage. She says it's shamefully low. It's risen only $3 in the last 3 decades, and it's beyond time to raise the minimum wage. We've addressed this in the past in the newspaper. Of course, Governor Wolf had said it's a travesty, and I'm paraphrasing him. It's embarrassing that Pennsylvania would have such a low minimum wage. And I would remind Dana Hamp-Gulick, if she would happen to listen, that when you set a minimum wage, you are, in effect, telling someone what their labor is worth. If you tell me that if you tell employers that they cannot hire someone below X amount of dollars, you are now preventing all the potential employees in the county and the state from selling their labor for that rate, if they should so choose. And in a free market, in a free society, I would have the right to sell my labor to you for whatever I want. If I want to work for you for $10 an hour, if I want to sell my labor to you for $12 an hour or $9 an hour, I should have that right as an employee. And so minimum wage laws, first and foremost, are an attack against the freedom and liberty of employees to sell their labor for whatever rate they want. But anyway, I digress there. She goes on and says, of course, as we mentioned, she says it's time to pass the PA Fairness Act to enshrine protections for all LGBTQ plus Pennsylvanians into law. Okay, again, what are these protections for this quote unquote community that are not there for everyone else? And again, if you start to say, well, they should have the right to have the benefits of marriage, well, no, because marriage is between a man and a woman. And so not just anybody gets those rights. If I'm a man who is single and not married, I don't get those rights and those privileges. So this, again, is that language to try to appeal to our emotions and bypass, logic here and say, we need to enshrine these protections because these are human rights issues, and they're not. They're not human rights issues. And she goes on, and protect no excuse absentee ballots, fight back against extremists who would roll back voting access. So anyway, there's just a few things. I know we're probably not too interested in that, but it is curious to me to see a contender to Michael Sturla, who seems to be quite content. He seems to be doing just fine promoting the liberal agenda, so I wonder what will come of that race. But the Republican races, I'm hoping to get, and I've reached out to Senator Ahmet, and I'm trying to set up a discussion between Mike Miller and Senator Ahmet to discuss, which one would be better for the people of Lancaster County, which man would do a better job of representing us, and which man would enact policies and sponsor bills that would lead to more freedom here in the county. So much more to come on the candidates and the primaries coming up. We should have more information about that in the days ahead. Well, those are our 3 local stories. We have another local story, and this is our hate crime. So let's go to our hate crime section now. All right, our hate crime for today, and again, if you're new to the podcast, this is a hate crime because it is motivated by hate. And the idea that hate crimes, as the liberals define them, I reject, because a crime that is done against another human being, that is an evil act, that is a offense against his person or property, is motivated by hate. So if you steal from someone, if you murder someone, if you bear false witness against someone, that's not motivated by love, it's motivated by hate. And it doesn't matter what the tone of the other person's skin is. It doesn't matter if they're male or female. None of those things matter when it comes to the law. What matters is, have you violated the moral law, and have you trespassed against this person's property or themselves as a person? So that's why crime should be, all crimes, all true crimes are hate crimes. If they're truly a crime, they should be a hate crime. So this is an old crime, but it's a new story in the sense that the latest request for relief from a man who killed his pregnant girlfriend was denied by Court of Appeals on March 28th. So the Third Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that a former Mannheim man who's currently serving life in prison for murdering his pregnant girlfriend and her unborn child should have his conviction upheld. So basically, this man, Matthew S. Becker, he's now 32 years old. He was sentenced to life in prison plus 20 to 40 years back in 2013 for shooting his pregnant girlfriend in the head at a Mannheim home, which happened back in 2011. So anyway, his argument was, well, when I basically admitted to the crime in so many words, I did so after saying, hey, I didn't want to talk anymore. I was trying to invoke, my right to remain silent, and the police didn't honor that. Well, the court looked at this, and basically he was in a room, the doors were open, he wasn't cuffed, he was free to go, and he said some things like, I don't know, I have nothing more to say, or I'm done, but he never got up, he never stopped talking, and so they said, no, you are still, we're upholding this conviction, and you will remain in prison. Now, I'll note a couple things, of course, that first, it is a hate crime because we're called to love our neighbors, and murdering your neighbor or a girlfriend, as the case may be, is a hate crime motivated by hate. If that's not a hate crime, there's no such thing as a hate crime. It doesn't matter the color of her skin. It doesn't matter the fact that she was a woman. It's a hate crime because he murdered her. It would be the same if he murdered a white male. So let's get rid of this idea that there are hate crimes. Crimes are motivated by hate only if they're committed against someone who's in a group that society today deems as some sort of marginalized group. All true crimes are hate crimes. And also, he was apparently charged for murdering his girlfriend and her unborn child. Now note that in this case, the law protects the child in the womb. And if we had consistent law, abortionists and those who procure abortions would be tried for murder as well. You see, it's consistently applied in a case like this where you have a woman who's pregnant and a man shoots her in the head and she dies and her baby dies, that he's charged with murdering his pregnant girlfriend and her unborn child. But yet when an abortionist goes in and intentionally rips a baby to shreds, that isn't murder. So this is another one of the great hypocrisy and one of the great judgments on our society is that we call evil good and good evil, and we allow for the murder of babies. So one of the questions that we should be asking each candidate and running for office is, will you support legislation that would criminalize the abortionist and those who procure abortions? And then if they're elected, we need to hold them to that if we are going to have justice. You want to talk about justice, economic, social, this and that, justice, this and that. Well, let's start with justice for those who are murdered in the womb. So that is our hate crime for today. Now, finally, we come to our story outside of the county, but we're not going too far, actually. We're just going to really look at a bill that Representative Barbara Klein from Cumberland County has sponsored. So this comes from WITF, and the headline reads, as Pennsylvania Republican bill targeting trans girls, which I have a problem with the title already, because really this should be, well, first of all, I shouldn't say targeting, but the trans girls is actually referring to men. So it says, as a Republican bill targeting men, but trans girls moves forward, a simple question goes unanswered. And this is by Brett Schultes. And so let's just look at this first. So the story says that at a House Education Committee hearing on Tuesday, State Representative Barbara Klein, Republican from Cumberland, spoke in detail about the bodies of, and again, transgender girls and women. This is just obfuscation. This is a deliberate deception. When you read transgender girls and women, you have to read men. They're referring to men here. Transgender girls and women should not be a category. These are just men. There's men and women. So Klein said this: they have larger hearts, greater lung capacity, and more muscle mass than females. For example, even after 2 full years of testosterone suppression, males still run faster than women. So, and they note that Klein said using the word males for trans women. So I appreciate that, and I'm trying to get Representative Gleim on for an interview as well. But the author of this article takes offense that Gleim, or at least needs to correct it, that Representative Gleim would refer to men as males instead of trans women. So good for her. We need to do that. We need to stop. I hope you haven't already, but if for any reason you have referred to men as trans women, stop doing it. Just call them what they are. They're men, and don't refer to them as she or her. Refer to them as he or him. And in fact, the editor for The Federalist was just blocked by Twitter, which really, who cares, but still blocked by Twitter for referring to Rachel Levine as a man. So we need more of that. We need to stop pandering to this stuff. So the story goes on and says that Klein, who doesn't want, and I'm going to replace this with the correct word, who doesn't want men competing in girls' sports, didn't have more details. So apparently the fact that men have larger hearts, greater lung capacity, more muscle mass, and more testosterone perform better isn't enough for this author to say, well, you know what? Men are different than women, and men shouldn't be competing against women in women's sports. And the critique is also that she didn't know how many trans people attend schools in Pennsylvania. Again, trans people it should not be a category we need. We can talk about men and women, and we can talk about men and women who are confused and need help to recognize that they are a man or a woman. And Representative Gleim said this. She said, quote, "No, to me, that doesn't matter," end quote. And yeah, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many men claim to be women, or women claim to be men, or boys claim to be girls, or girls claim to be boys. It doesn't matter how many people do it. What matters, Klein said, is protecting women's sports and making sure that biological women have their own category to compete in. I would only critique the fact that we don't even need to use biological before women and men. I mean, it's kind of sad that I understand why she's doing that, but that's kind of, in a sense, unwittingly giving some ground to the liberal side and say, well, there's men and women, then there's biological men and women. There's just men and women. And there are biological differences, there's emotional differences, there's all these differences that are wrapped up in that word that we have recognized for generations that for some reason now we're having a problem understanding. So, I mean, Klein is spot on otherwise, that basically, I don't care how many people are confused about this. We are going to protect girls and women and allow them to compete against other girls and women. And the author of the article says, as the proposal gains momentum, some critics say that it is unnecessary and sends a message to trans people, let's say sends a message to men or women, that their gender identity is not accepted. And I would just say, exactly. If you are a man claiming to be a woman, or a woman claiming to be a man, I do not accept your gender identity, and I never will. The one that you claim. I accept the one that God gave you at birth. And none of us in this county, in the state, in the nation, should accept any other gender identity than the one that God has given a person. So, this person, they're presenting it as a negative, but it's exactly right. And conservatives need to not back down. We do not accept your gender identity if you are claiming to be something you're not. So, Gleim, she mentioned runner CC Telfer, who was a man, and again referred to as a trans woman by this author, but a man who previously competed and won a woman's 400-meter hurdles race in 2019. And it's interesting, there's a link, if you click on the link about this man who competed against women, it links to an ESPN article. And in the article it says that transgender runner CC Telfer will not be allowed to compete in the women's 400-meter hurdles at U.S. Olympic trials because Telfer has not met the conditions World Athletics established in its eligibility regulations for certain women's events. Yeah, no, you think that maybe the fact that he's a man, he has not met the conditions required to compete in a women's event. So the idea of this is just absurd. So anyway, this bill is going on, and of course, Governor Wolf will veto it if it gets to him. But we need to, I mean, this is just a no-brainer. And the fact that we have to have this bill is just a sad indictment against the state of our society, where we are just destroying women's sports, and they say, well, it's such a minute percentage, and the Will Thomas thing, the Penn swimmer who's a man who's competing against a woman, well, that's just a small sampling, and this guy who is he's the head of some sort of U.S. Let me see here. Anyway, he says, well, I don't know what to do with this, the Will Thomas situation, but that's just one small thing. There's so many of these people out there, and most of the time they're not, the men aren't winning and beating the women, and we need to really embrace and help this stigmatized community. And folks, we just need to reject all that. The way we help people who are confused about their gender and sexuality is not to embrace sexual deviancy and perversion, but to lovingly tell people that what they are doing is sinful and to point them in the right direction. So I'm sure there'll be more developments with this bill. But again, that is something that is going for the state of Pennsylvania, and the state legislature. Representative Barbara Klein is sponsoring this bill to prevent men from competing against women, and I would assume it would go down into boys and girls in schools and things like that. Obviously, a great bill, needs to be passed, and the more the liberals fight against this stuff, the more they're just really digging their own grave, in my mind. So more on that to come soon. Anyway, that's it for today with the Lancaster Patriot podcast. If you do not have a subscription to our newspaper, check us out, thelancasterpatriot.com. We are a print newspaper once a week for now, but that hopefully will change soon. We have a lot more stuff coming. We're excited about the days ahead. We provide you with an alternative to the liberal media, mainstream media. We focus first and foremost on Lancaster County, and then we look at the state, the nation, and the world. And something we have that a lot of our subscribers really like is faith and perspective sections that are not simply fluff, not simply kind of the, very shallow Christianity, but we really want to challenge people. I mean, I want to be challenged when I read some of these articles from some of the authors that write. I'm challenged. We want to challenge people to apply their Christianity to their life, to the culture, to the society. What does the Bible say about government? What does the Bible say about education? What does the Bible say about crime and punishment? I mean, these are some of the things we try to address in our faith and perspective section, so that not only do you get the news focused first on your county, because that's what matters most, but you also get a perspective on that news, a biblical perspective. So go to thelancasterpatriot.com, subscribe today, get our paper, tell others about us, and I'll see you next time. Until then, Godspeed.